Hi, my name is Talia, and welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Sorry it's been so long since I have recorded a booktube. I've just had a lot of fatigue, and I have just been having a lot of health things going on. Just haven't had the energy to do a booktube every time that I felt like I might. Toward the end of the day, I would be so wiped out that I just didn't have enough brain power. So that being said, while I do have books to talk about, if I go through the books that I've finished, it's going to be very quickly. Most of the focus will probably be on the books that I'm reading, and I don't think I'm going to focus on any TBR this time around. Simply, whoops, sorry, hold on, let me turn off this alarm. There we go. Simply because I don't want this to run overly long, because it's been a while since I put something up, and I don't want to do a whole lot of editing. Okay, so, to start with the things that I finished, oh gosh, it's been a long time since I've been on here, because I have down here the first thing being Blue Dreams, the science behind the story of the drugs that changed our minds. And that's by Lauren Slater. That was I think I listened to that book that one was Libby. A lot of the books that you'll hear me mention that I've listened to, those are books that I borrowed from the library. A lot of times those are books that I can't get as a Kindle, either because on Kindle they're more expensive, or because my library only carries it as an audiobook through the apps. So that usually is what happens with the audiobooks. So I ended up giving this, toward the beginning I was going to maybe give this more of a 4.5, but by the time I got to I think it was last chapter or two, I ended up giving it a 4.25. At the last part of the book, the first part is most of the book is really good, a little bit dry at points, but she's talking about the history of psychiatric medicines. She goes into really the journey of testing them, everything that goes into making these drugs become a reality. She even has a little part where she talks about how diagnoses get put into the DSM, regardless which number is DSM-4 or DSM-5. For those who aren't familiar, the DSM is the diagnosis book of psychiatric meds. I used to have one in my office when I was working psychiatric nursing. But the problem is, as she mentions in the book, is the diagnoses in there are very variable. Psychology doesn't necessarily have the same cut and dryness that a lot of physical medical conditions do. So sometimes the diagnoses can be a bit wibbly wobbly, and you'll see things change in the DSMs. So she talks about that, which I found to be interesting. Now, the last chapter or so, she starts talking about what she sees the future of psychiatric medicine going. And I remember discussing this when I was still working as an outpatient psychiatric nurse. Excuse me, water. And at that time, we were talking about the fact that psychotropics were being discussed as potential for managing certain psychiatric conditions. In my opinion, she was a little bit too excited about this option. From a professional as well as a personal, professionally and personally, my opinion is that you need to move slowly at those. She was very hard on the medicines that have already been approved, already been fully tested. She seemed almost only able or willing to see the benefits of psychotropics. And there is no magic pill. If there's something that can fix about everything, it's snake oil. Um, and anytime you're dealing with something that can make the mind see things that aren't there, I question its use in any sort of psychiatry. If you're talking about using LSD, you're talking about using some of these medicines that can truly make you see things that aren't there, then I highly question the benefits of using those sort of medications. We are trying to get rid of hallucinations in other patients. It just seems odd that we would then promote using a substance that would cause hallucinations. And we can't say that we have control over it. We can't always say we have control over what we already have out FDA approved. I just don't feel that it's, at this point at least, responsible. I'm not sure if it ever will be, to use something that can cause hallucinations. We can't guarantee what those hallucinations will be. They might be truly damaging. You can't know. So I thought that she was too excited about that. I think part of it was that she's desperately looking for something to help her with her own psychiatric issues. And I can understand that, desperately looking for an answer when nothing seems to help. But I question whether psychotropic drugs are really the answer. So that I did bump it down for that. I was very uncomfortable, skeptical during that whole last part. She definitely showed her bias. She definitely showed her own desperation for something to help. And like I said, I just don't know that psychotropics have a place in medical practice, or psychiatric practice in this case. So yes, that was Blue Dreams. I did read The Secret Garden for the first time in many years. I ended up actually giving it 4 stars. I remembered liking it better than I did this time around. And this book was by Frances Hodges Burnett. Honestly, I was really invested until you start getting to the point where Colin does his long lectures on magic, and I just sort of lost. They lost me. It was truly felt like a lecture, and I got bored. I know that based on where Mary grew up, you can see some of that, but it was just a long, here is my whole thought process on how magic works. It felt like telling versus showing, and I just got very bored, and I started wanting to skip over those parts. So, yeah, that did bump it down for me. And I read that one on Kindle. I think I've had that for a while. I also read on Kindle something that I guess it's based off of a TV show. That's what I understand, but it's called an official, so not unofficial, but an official Midsummer Murders interactive novel. Could you survive Midsummer? And when I saw this, for one thing, it was inexpensive. For another thing, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a choose your own adventure. I loved those books as a kid. And this was by Simon Brew. And honestly, I wrote 4.5 to 5. It could probably be 4.75. I got close. I don't know how you could get any close. I know that you can get the perfect amount. I did not. I came close to getting something that was decent. But I can't tell you how many times my character, died, or I only got, a small piece of it. But no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't get that, golden, absolutely perfect. But it was cool. It was really fun to do a choose your own adventure. If you enjoyed those books as a kid, I would recommend it. This is one, that's aimed a little bit more at an adult audience, so the clues are going to be a bit harder. And I enjoyed it. I will probably at some point try again to see if I can get a little bit closer to getting that perfect score. Then I ended up listening to an audiobook via Hoopla, When Death Becomes Life, Notes from a Transplant Surgeon by Joshua. Maybe I have Joshua Dr. Mesrick, which means I probably did it out of order. It's probably Dr. Joshua Mesrick, because the other doesn't make any sense. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. There wasn't a ton of swearing in there, but there was a little bit and it would catch me by surprise. I'm not usually a fan of swearing in books. It wasn't a ton of it, but I would give a warning if you don't like any in your books. But I was very invested in this. I ended up buying 2 other books on transplant surgery that I'm going to read because of that. He was very bad for me. He would quote books at the beginning or reference books, which is just terrible for someone who loves to read, especially if it's within the area that they like to read. But it was really a book of hope. I forgot how I'd known some of the stuff about how amazing transplant surgery could be. This really reminded me about why I wanted originally to be an organ donor. Now, will anyone really be interested in my organs? Probably not. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means all my connective tissue is stretchy, so I'm not sure that it could, and that includes everything. Everything. No one's even going to want my eyes, most likely. So, more likely, any organs that I would donate would go to research, but who knows, that might help other people with Ehlers-Danlos down the line. There really isn't much of a downside to organ donation, especially since they do have I'm sorry, my brain. They can't take the organs until you hit brain death. They have to absolutely verify that there is brain death. They can take organs after brain death, even if the heart is still beating, because if the heart stops beating, you can't donate the heart. But with brain death, the person's not coming back. So it was very interesting. I learned a lot. Wonderful name for that book. It truly is. Death becoming life. Just an amazing book. He kept referring to when they would give organs, talking about giving an organ as being giving the gift of life, which is just an amazing way of looking at it. I really enjoyed this book. Now, if you don't like description of, surgeries, that kind of thing, this probably won't be the book for you. Because they do describe surgeries. It is a part of the book. It's very much of a book for someone who enjoys medical, but also they're stories about people. They're stories about the generosity of the donors and then the people whose lives were changed forever. There are stories of successes and stories of failures. It's just a very interesting book. I have only a few more, I guess, and then I can go on to what I'm reading now. I listened to also, this was on Hoopla, The Professor and the Madman by, I'm going to say the first name right this time because apparently I keep wanting to say Simon and Simone, but Simon Winchester. And I gave this about a 4.5 stars, so still pretty high. Sometimes, now I know part of this is because I was having migraines and fatigue, so the part of the focusing issue was medical, not the book's fault. I kept having to replay chapters because of those issues, not the book's fault. But this covered, gosh, it's been a while, so I don't quite remember the doctors' names. Also, you had a couple guys whose names, a couple of the main, not main characters, your main protagonists who were, who had their name beginning with the same letter. So I kept constantly mixing them up. That's nobody's fault. That's real life. They're not going to change it to make things easier for the reader. That would be silly. But, no, it was very interesting. It talks about a guy who had gone insane. They really weren't quite sure at that time period what caused it. I believe either he ended up with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, or there has been theories in the more recent times that this gentleman might have had schizophrenia. But he had a lot of delusions, and in the course of his delusions, he ended up murdering somebody while he was in England. He was actually an American doctor, American physician. And he was a very intelligent man in spite of these deep-set delusions that he suffered with. And he truly suffered with these delusions. And he ended up having to be incarcerated for life in an asylum, first in England and then in America as his health declined. But one of the ways that he coped and kept his mind active and tried to distract himself from these really distressing delusions was he had read in one of the magazines or books, or I think they would stick in books like these flyers, where they were sorry, my brain. Oh yes, they were trying to get people to find words. So they would have a list of words, and they would try to get people to find as early a use of that word in as many ways that it could be used as possible, so it could be put in the Oxford English Dictionary. And this Oxford English Dictionary, if you don't know, is it is the dictionary of all dictionaries, fondly referred to as the OED. I would love to own an OED. That will never happen. They are way too expensive. And, language changes all the time. But, yeah, OED's been around forever. I know that the physician fought in the Civil War, so this was Victorian England that they were working on the OED. And he ended up becoming quite attached to the gentleman who was in charge of putting together OED. The gentleman would visit him in the psychiatric facility. But this American physician who was stuck in the asylum ended up being one of the most reliable, at least until his condition worsened, one of the most reliable provider of words that they had, words and examples that they had in the OED. So it was a very interesting story, not only for those who are interested in the etymology of words and just words in general, but also for those who are interested just in personal stories. You have the story of the physician added on to the story of the gentleman who was in charge of putting the OED together. So you had these two dovetailing stories. So, off to the side, you also have a little bit of the story of the man who was murdered. I do recommend this book. I don't know if you would enjoy it more as an audio or a physical. I could see where you could possibly benefit from it being a Kindle or a physical book. I only listen to it, but I can see the benefits of doing the other. I don't have the book here anymore, but I finished Mistress and the Monarchy by Alison Weir. I actually ended up giving it 4 stars. Alison Weir's writing style remains, as always, very easy to read. But maybe I've become more of a critical reader recently, maybe because I've read more history books since I started with Alison Weir years ago. But I found myself, and it might have also been because of the subject matter that she had chosen, I found myself finding things that kind of would distract me within the book. One of the things that, first of all, she would build like whole, she build like, I don't know, tapestries out of like this little scrap of thread. It would be like she'd build this entire story out of the barest of evidence, and she didn't do it all the time, but sometimes it'd be like, really? I think there might have been, you can't be sure about that. It's you don't have a whole lot of evidence for that. The other thing was that she had a bit of a tendency to say, obviously. Nothing's obvious in history. Especially that far back where you don't have a lot of evidence. There was not a lot to be had about, sorry, my brain's not working right now. The mistress of the monarchy was Catherine Swineford. And there's not, other than people who were her detractors, they would sometimes speak about her, but there's not a lot outside of that. She's building a lot of her story based on things about John of Gaunt's expenses. And that was the man who was, Catherine Swineford was the mistress of for many years, and then later he married her. But some of the things were just, she would say things like, and, we can only assume that John Gaunt visited her, or we can only imagine how she felt, but it would be a lot of it. A few times, but when it's constant like that, it just kind of feels like, sometimes it felt when she was writing that she imagined that all John of Gaunt did was think of Catherine Swineford, and I'm really sure that was not the case, especially since he had other mistresses during that time period. But she also would make assumptions, and this could have well been true at the beginning, but she made assumptions that every time, first of all, Catherine Swineford's sister married Geoffrey Chaucer. So Geoffrey Chaucer was his patron. Thank you. His patron, one of his patrons, a big patron of his, was John of Gaunt. Now, I agree with Alison Weir initially that, yes, it well could have been that part of why Chaucer got a chance with John of Gaunt might have been because of Catherine Swineford, although it could have equally been because of Catherine's sister, who also was very loyal to actually all of John of Gaunt's wives in serving them, and also didn't sleep with John of Gaunt. And he would give her gifts of gratitude for service towards his wife, as well as to Catherine Swineford. So when Alison Weir would say things like, yes, Chaucer was probably given this honor because of Catherine, or Catherine's sister is Philippa was her name. She was named after Philippa of Hainaut, who was John's mother. When she would say that either Philippa or Geoffrey Chaucer got certain benefits, probably because of their connection to Catherine, I'd be like, yeah, maybe at the beginning, but honestly, Philippa served John's wives loyally and for, I think, maybe even to her death. And then Geoffrey Chaucer, I assume he actually liked the guy, liked his writing, so I'm assuming that maybe some of the favors he did for him were actually due to the fact that he was fond of Geoffrey of his own merit. I just can't imagine that he would just be like, yeah, this is all because of Catherine. I'm assuming that Geoffrey earned it just as much as Philippa did. So I did kind of find that as you could see where she was stretching, and it just didn't always. Sometimes there were holes where she was stretching. That being said, she is very readable. I just didn't. I found the holes more in this one than I remember finding in other of her books. I do plan on reading, though, a book on Philippa Hainau, because I know I'm missing that. The Mother of John of Gaunt, because she sounded like an interesting person. And I am currently reading a book on John of Gaunt to try to get a fuller picture, not just a picture of John of Gaunt, based on the view from Everything's About Catherine Swineford. Because honestly, the book would have been much better if the book had been about both of them, or even about John of Gaunt, like Alison Weir had originally intended. It was her publisher that suggested that she go just with Catherine Swineford, and I think that was a mistake. I think that she would have been better. It would have served her better to either do it on John of Gaunt or on both of them. Make it more about the love story with both of them covered, and then you could also move away from the love story a bit and cover more of John's life without feeling like you're trying to tie Catherine in where she doesn't really belong. Then I listened to In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. 4 stars. It was a gripping story. It was quite violent. This is a early I forget when the period was, but it was a really gruesome murder of a family. It's true crime. I wish I'd stopped sooner. There was it was probably exact quotes from the people involved, but there was more language than I like, and I wish I had stopped sooner. It was a bit of a, it was a very dark tale. I'm not sure if I would recommend it. It wasn't terrible, but like I said, the language is a bit strong, and it's very dark. I then listened to, on Hoopla, The Art of the Con by Anthony M. Amore. I gave that 4.5 stars. I think this was another one where I was suffering from fatigue and trying to listen to this with migraines. Very interesting. I did end up looking up some of the artists while I was listening because I wanted to see the art that was being spoken of. Not only were they talking about how certain forgers did their thing and how they would manage to fake it or whatever, they also would talk about the unscrupulous museum directors or pretend collectors or whatever. So this is about all sorts of cons that deal with the art world. And I found it quite enjoyable. It is a story about people because when it comes down to it, that's what you're dealing with at cons. It's really you're taking a lot of money from people and you're causing harm not only to the people whose money you take, but also to, if they're still alive, the artists whose works you are either stealing or devaluing to a point that their works are useless now or worthless now, or because you're putting out such poor copies, it really, again, devalues their work. So that was enjoyable. I'd seen this, I forget, it came up on Goodreads as something, you might like this because of other things you read. And my dad is a self-taught oil painter. He does it in his free time. I have a beautiful oil painting up here. Maybe I'll take a picture and show it to you. My dad just put it in my room. It's a lovely picture of Jesus on the cross. He put it where I can see it from my bed. And he's like, your room is usually a cave. And then that will look really good when you're having light sensitivity. And it's really quite lovely. It's one of his more recent ones. It just finished drying. So I get to have a painting in my room, which I never thought I would because I live in a cave. But yeah, he does oil paintings. He's self-taught. He looks into the masters. He looks into how they do their finishing, that kind of thing. We actually have a copy in the house that he did of Mona Lisa, looking into what, like the fact that it was done on wood and all this other kind of thing. That's just, and that's without him pretending to be somebody else. Some of the efforts that these forgers go into are above and beyond what my dad went into to try to make his copy of the Mona Lisa for himself. He has his own signature somewhere on there. I forget where he put it. But they go into like, if it's not something that's made in a form, for lack of a better term, some of the pieces of art, I'm not shocked they get forgeries of, because it's just, you take a form, you fill it with like metal, gold, whatever, and voila, that's art. I'm a snob probably because of the beautiful artwork I live with and I've grown up with, I live with. I've grown up with oil paintings around me. I have oil paintings that were done of both me and my sister, my mom. So I'm really spoiled when it comes to art. My dad taught both my sister and I to draw, so we look at things from a more classic view. But a lot of the things that get faked aren't the classic things because they're harder to fake. Not only because it's harder to fake a style, something that's more realistic, like it's a lot harder to fake a Rembrandt than it is modern art. Just because you have to not only get it looking like a Rembrandt, but you have to worry about, what he used to prepare the canvas, what he used to, seal it, the kind of paints that were available at the time, what if the canvas would have been period appropriate, and all the efforts they go through to make that happen when they do an older piece. It's covered in this book. So this covers multiple cons, and I also got my I picked up the Kindle book of this for my dad for Father's Day, and while I was listening to it, he was reading it, so we were able to compare notes, which was fun. I think he's already started the other one that I gave him, which is about Vermeer forgeries, which would be harder. I have that book set aside on Hoopla to listen to as well, so eventually I will be doing that one. So yes, if you like stories about people cleverly breaking the law, this might be for you. Or if you like art, this might be for you. I also read, this was recommended to me by Too Fond of Books. She's on booktube. She's a lot of fun to watch. I haven't been keeping up with most of my booktube just because migraines and fatigue have really prevented that, but I hope to get back to things again. She suggested, because I had mentioned I have trouble really getting into historical fiction, especially if there's if some of the characters are real life people, because I don't like mixing my fact with my fiction. And if people are having historical figures say or do things they didn't do, it kind of like doesn't fit in my head. And I also have problems with other people writing characters that were written by other authors, particularly authors who have a definite voice, where you can tell that this is this author. Because a lot of times when someone's mimicking an author, it doesn't come across very well. I noticed it right away. I think it's Black Coffee, which was originally a screenplay by Agatha Christie, but was made into a novel form by a different author. And as soon as I started, I'm like, this doesn't feel like a Poirot book. This doesn't feel like Agatha Christie's prose, because it wasn't her prose. it was her story, because it was a screenplay of hers, but it was this other guy's prose. And because it didn't have her voice, I couldn't get invested. And that usually is what happens to me if I try to read a book using characters by an author I am fond of, but it's a different author writing those characters. Now, Carrie Bebris, who's the author that was recommended to me by Tufanza Books, does an amazing job of capturing the feel and the tone, the voice, the flavor of Jane Austen in her Mr. and Mrs. Darcy mysteries. I read the first one, Pride and Prescience, or Truth Universally Acknowledged. I gave it about 5 stars. I might take it down to about a 4.5. If you don't like spoilers, you might want to step away for a second, and then come back in a couple minutes. But maybe I'll try taking down the picture of the book when I'm done spoiling it. It's not a real big spoiler, but it appears that it seems the first 2 books, there's some sort of supernatural elements to it. And that's not really my thing. I don't particularly care for supernatural in my books, which is a shame because I actually really love this writing style. But it's I just don't like supernatural in books. It's just not my thing. It throws me off. I don't enjoy it as much. So it's unfortunate because I really enjoy the writing style. I really enjoyed it to the point where I realized it was going supernatural, which was toward the end. I think it feels a bit like a cheap trick, and it tends to make characters act out of character, and I tend to get embarrassed for characters when that happens. It's one thing if they're making choices that cause them their problems, but I feel bad when it's out of the character's control, when they are not the ones responsible for what's happening to them. And it's not like things are happening around them. They are being made outside of any control of their own by some supernatural element to act in a way foreign to them. And that just does not sit well with me. If a character messes up, I'd rather it be their own mistake, even if they were blackmailed or otherwise forced into it, but not like literally they had no choice because they were being controlled, like by a supernatural element. So yeah, I did wish that she had chosen not to go supernaturally with this. She wrote, her style is beautiful. It is really enjoyable to read. And I was really looking forward to seeing how she would wrap this up. I did not expect her to wrap it up the way she did. And yeah, a little bit of a letdown after the build-up. But all in all, most of the book was 5 stars. It only went down to 4.5 for me by the end. So if you did sit that out, yes, good book. Just the ending wasn't quite my cup of tea. There's certain elements that weren't my cup of tea. And I'll try to remember to keep the cover up, picture the cover up until I'm done talking about that little bit of a spoiler. But I needed, after all the nonfiction, I felt like I needed a palate cleanser. So I went and pulled out the second book of A Lady's Guide to Gossip and Murder. I love that. I love that series. And I can't remember if I found it independently on Amazon or if I found it through Tufanza Books. I think it came up with my recommended on Amazon. And I think I got pulled in because the titles were just so fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I read it all in one sitting. Diane Freeman's just very fun to read. She's the epitome of just a feel-good read for me. I love her characters. I love her style. I love the way she puts together her plots. Yes, I I thoroughly enjoyed this, but I have to read this when I know I have a long time to sit up, because I know I won't put it down until I'm done, or I won't want to put it down until I'm done. I think I have 2 or 3 others in the series. I know she just put out another one, which I don't have yet, but I think I have 1 or 2 to read before that point. So that's all with the ones that I have read already. I don't know how long I'm running, but I'll probably stop with what I've been reading, and then stop it there. Not worry about TBR except in passing like I've done so far. So I don't know why I wrote Return of the King twice. Probably because I didn't read and see that I did it before. So I have read a bit of Return of the King. Slowly but surely. I think I'm about halfway through. And that includes the appendices. So yay. Someone made me this bookmark. I don't think this is one I designed. No, I think this is one that someone made me. And I keep catching it on things because of this tassel. So I keep pulling my bookmark out and having to remember where I was. I'm not sure if I've updated my Goodreads yet. I should check. So I'm with Sam and Frodo right now. By the time I get to Two Towers, I enjoy the Sam and Frodo parts, but I usually really want to be with the other characters because Sam and Frodo's parts are really dark. I mean, they're important, but very, very dark by the time you start getting to Two Towers and Lord of the Rings, because, I mean, they really have the most difficult part of this story. And it's really hard at this point for Frodo. I am glad I'm rereading this. I like Frodo's character a lot better than I remember liking him. Others may not agree with me, but I didn't care for Elijah Wood's portrayal of Frodo. I actually felt like the Hobbits generally got a bit of a short shrift, but whatever. They did not get their due. I felt that they kind of got pushed to the side a lot, and more attention given to the men and to the elves, even the dwarves. And I felt like that was a shame. I mean, we're not even going to discuss the catastrophe they made of the poor Hobbit book. That was a disaster. And poor Bilbo. But I forgot really what an amazing character Frodo is. I forgot a lot of I forgot other aspects of his personality that you just really didn't get to see a lot of, I felt, in the movies. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I always love Sam. Pippin and Merry are so much better in the books. Pippin and Merry are like idiots in the movie. And I like Merry. I mean, I like Pippin too, but Merry was smart. And Merry, I mean, although Pippin was the one who first figured out that about the ring, he spied on Bilbo. Spoiler. Yeah, I mean, both Merry and Pippin were just smarter than they were given credit for. Yeah, I really enjoy these characters a lot more in the book than I did in the movie. So if you've only watched the movies for The Lord of the Rings, I can't imagine you're watching... I mean, maybe you do watch booktube and haven't read The Lord of the Rings yet. If that did happen, yeah, do that. I would personally start with The Hobbit. It's a little bit of a quicker read, and then move on to Lord of the Rings. Even though initially when Tolkien wrote it, from what I understand, he didn't actually intend The Hobbit to be a part of what he was building in what eventually became the Silmarillion. But as he started writing The Hobbit, and then he continued building off of that Hobbit story to create Lord of the Rings, he started incorporating the story of men and of hobbits into his Legendarium, where originally his Legendarium was really focused on the elves with, some side notes on the dwarves. Hobbits weren't even a thing, and men were like minor, you'd have a few major characters from the race of men, like Beren, or gosh, Baron's the first one that's come. Oh, you would have oh, blast, the one who got the star on his not Elendil. Wait, yeah, Elendil. Probably remember the name wrong because I actually haven't finished reading the Silmarillion. That is my goal after this. I think that I'm up to it now that I've read and enjoyed books on mythology. I wasn't ready for it when I first tried reading the Silmarillion. So that is my goal after I eventually finish reading this, because I'm not allowed to read my Beren and Luthien book with all the beautiful artwork in it. I'm trying to read in somewhat order. I'm doing Silmarillion, I think. Then it might be The Fall of Gondolin. No, it's Silmarillion. Then I'd be reading it's the I can't bring it to my oh wait, Children of Hurin. There we go. Turin's one of the characters. Children of Hurin. And that's actually a story with a bunch of men in it. Then after Children of Hurin, it would be, I think, it would probably be Beren and Luthien, and then maybe The Fall of Gondolin, because I think that's where it falls chronologically. So yeah, and then I have the, I think it's the Lost Tales 1 and 2. So I do plan on eventually reading what I own of Legendarium. So I really look forward to getting to that point, because I was watching a lot of Tolkien Tube for a while, and it really made me want to dive in personally. I've not read it in a little while, but I started reading again Heir to the Empire. It's the first book in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. Always a favorite of mine. It's a part of the original Star Wars extended universe before Disney and Disney in particular, but before a lot of the original canon extended universe got written over because money. So I'm a big fan of the original extended universe, which is now called Legends. Just a little salty about that. So I'm reading Heir to the Empire. This is this trilogy that introduced me to Timothy Zahn, and from that I started reading his original works, which include Angel Mass, Quadrail series, which is amazing if you've never read it, and just other books. I know he has a series called Cobra. It's been a long time since I've read it, so I can't remember how much I enjoyed that one. I used to own quite a few of his books. Now I have most of them on Kindle. I think I might still have a physical form of Angel Mass somewhere. I regret getting rid of my physical books for Quadrail, but I was trying to save room. And I've promptly been filling up with physical books again, because logic. Been reading slowly but surely Migraine by Oliver Sacks. The more I read, the less I understand about migraines, because the neurological, everything neuro is complex. It's very confusing. I don't think it's because he's confusing the way he writes. I think it's just so many things neuro can look like other things, and trying to differentiate if this thing is actually that thing, or if you have both things, or whatever. It's really confusing. So I'm hoping as I continue, I'll understand more. I did find it interesting that migraines don't always have to have headaches associated, which I did wonder, because most of I will get a little bit here, but a lot of times my migraines live in my neck. And sometimes back of head as well, but a lot of times in my neck and light sensitivity. And the only reason why I know it's a migraine by the end of it is when I take my L-triptan and take a nap, it goes away. So, yes, this is an interesting read. You gotta read it slowly, though, and know that you may not come out of it immediately with more of an understanding of migraines. This is too complex for that. I said that one. I started reading Suspense and Sensibility, or First Impressions Revisited, the second Mr. and Mrs. Darcy novel. I had set it aside. We were starting to get into the elements that I had mentioned that weren't exactly my favorite thing about the first book. And I don't feel like reading those elements right now, which is a shame because I am really enjoying the character she's choosing to focus on, the way she's building things, like the way she's crafted these characters. I mean, even though they're characters that previously existed, the way she's writing them, and they sound like themselves, they're believable, and I like certain characters she's focusing on that didn't get focused on in certain of the other books. And I don't want to go too much in detail. I'm being purposely broad. So if you don't mind supernatural elements, I would highly recommend these books. They're beautifully written. It's just that I don't care for supernatural elements. I really wished that these books didn't have them because I tell you what, they're funny, just like Pride and Prejudice is. They're clever. Yeah, they're worth a read. So let's see. And that's Carrie Bebrus once again. I think I mentioned that I'm reading The Red Prince, The Life of John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster by Helen Carr. I think I've read another book by Helen Carr, or maybe I just own another book by Helen Carr. I can't remember. I do a lot of repeat reads of history authors. But yeah, it's good to see. Some of this stuff is repeating what I read in the book on Catherine Swineford, but because it's more from John of Gaunt's point of view, I feel like I'm getting, or more John of Gaunt focused, I feel like I'm getting a more well-rounded view of it. I'm enjoying it a little bit. I'm enjoying it more from his point of view. I haven't read it in a little while, but that's partially because other fatigue and all that, but also other things have distracted. One of those things is Washington Life by Ron Chernow. Whenever I pick that book up, I wonder why I ever stopped reading it, because it's a very enjoyable read. I learned things about historical figures that I thought I already knew everything about, and then I find out that I just knew nothing about them, or very little about them. Lafayette is super cool, and I can't wait to read the book I have on it says something about father and son, George Washington Lafayette, because they had an almost father-son relationship, which I never knew until I read this book. So I really look forward to reading that book that I own. Now this book here is like 900 pages, so I'm going to be reading this forever. But it's an enjoyable read. It's a relaxing read. It's a read that I can take to the doctor's office and be able to put down and not worry about it. I'll be able to pick it up right where I left off and be fine. So once again, highly recommend Washington Life by Ron Chernow. This is going to be a 5-star book for me. I will happily read his other books. Even the one on Hamilton, who I don't particularly like Hamilton as a person so far. It's not Chernow's fault that I don't like Hamilton. So then I need to finish this book before I have to return it on Hoopla. It's another audiobook because, like I said, a lot of the books I had to borrow from the library are audiobooks. And I usually like to keep one audiobook on hand for when I have migraines or when I want to do a lot of knitting, so that way I'm able to make my way through a book, but still either try to rest from a migraine or get some knitting done. So this book, the title pulled me in. I don't even know how I found it. The Dead Duke, His Secret Wife, and the Missing Corpse, an Edwardian Case of Deception and Intrigue. And it's by Pugh Marie Eatwell. I think that's how it's said. Piu is the first name. And it's narrated by Barnaby Edwards. This is a really interesting story. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the title honestly says a lot. It's a great mystery. You go into a bunch of different things about exhumations and how easy it was to pretend to be someone else in times before internet. I mean, think about Edwardian times. You really didn't have to do that much to pretend to be someone else. But yes, look at the legal system. Look at cons. Look at a bunch of different things. So yes, I am enjoying this. I'm about 80% through. I need to finish it before I'm forced to return it because I've taken way too long to listen to this. And then I just started reading, and truly reading, not just listening. I told myself that as soon as I got as soon as I found out for sure that I would need neurosurgery, I would start reading this book. Well, about, I think it is a week ago today. Today is Thursday the 28th. So a week ago, so last Thursday, I found out that I will in fact need neurosurgery. Not brain surgery. And this guy's a brain surgeon, neurosurgeon. My neurosurgeon's focusing on the spine for me because that's where a lot of my issues are. But I told myself if I found out I needed another neurosurgery, I would start this book, which is Gray Matter, A Neurosurgeon Discovers the Power of Prayer, One Patient at a Time. And I need to try to make this last because it's only 300 some pages. I think it's 304. Yeah. And my neurosurgery is not until September 14th. Hopefully things won't get pushed back. We're having some insurance issues. Yeah, so I'm going to have to try to make this last as long as I can because I kind of want to take this into the hospital with me, but I also wanted to get it started. It got a good reading style right now. The text is nice and large, which is good, especially, oopsie, not sure if you can see very well. Yeah. Especially if I'm going to be trying to read this after a surgery or right before surgery where my attention will be like all over the place. So I am looking forward to reading this. He's talking about how patients react when the first time they're asked to pray for them, how it affects him, how it affects his patients. And yeah, it's very, I like the premise. This isn't, the surgeon is the one who, I think he wrote this with somebody else, so the guy would have probably cleaned up his writing to make it easier to read. My neurosurgeon actually prays with us as well. I don't remember it, but I also had a lot on my mind at the time. My mom says that he definitely prayed with us. And I know occasionally when I thought that a patient might be open to it, when I was a nurse, I would offer to pray with somebody if they seemed particularly nervous and they seemed open to it. It's really, if it seems appropriate to that patient in that circumstance, it can be a great gift. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Sometimes when you're going to the scariest things, it's just nice to feel like he has it in control. You're not doing it all by yourself. The doctor's hands are guided, and there's a reason for hope, reason for peace. So, yeah, looking forward to going on with this book, but slowly, so I can have it when I want it. Yeah, I think that's everything for me. I'm sure I rambled on way too long. I will either edit this tonight. What time is it? Oh, I have some time to edit tonight while I'm eating. So I'll probably edit this tonight, hopefully have it up by tomorrow. Sorry it's taking me so long to put something up. I don't know if I'll get another one out before neurosurgery. I will try. I know as August gets along and as we get closer to the surgery, I will be running around getting the pre-op stuff ready. Running around, I can't run. Going around trying to get the stuff ready for neurosurgery. And then afterwards, I will have a decently long recovery. I have to be on bed rest or modified bed rest for 2 weeks after surgery, after coming home from the hospital. So, I will not be recording anything during that period. And I'm going to be very limited on what I lift, so probably no huge piles of books. Definitely not going to be reading Gone with the Wind at that point. My ginormous Gone with the Wind. That probably will break my what I can lift requirement. It'll probably like destroy me. So, but yeah, thank you very much if you stuck through this. I'm sure this is quite long. Sorry if you don't feel overly comfortable with medical talk, but if you don't, you probably wouldn't be listening to my channel anyway, or watching my channel anyway, because I tend to talk a lot about medical books because that's what I'm interested in reading. So I do tend to talk a little bit, feel more comfortable talking about medical because that's what I read. That you probably aren't going to mind that much if you are sitting through me talking about my medical books too. Okay, so that's it for now. I do have TBRs that I have sitting here, but I only want to bring up one of them because it's something I don't think I've ever brought up before. Not this one. This one. My dad brought up an article. This is the only TBR I'll bring up. My dad brought up an article he had read. Apparently Hitler had a doctor who he trusted implicitly. And apparently he wasn't a very good doctor, the way my dad described it. And apparently he was Jewish, but Hitler swore by him. And immediately I was like, I wonder if there's a book on him. And I found this. It's called The Newly Discovered Journals of Theo Morell, the physician who treated Hitler to the last days of his life. And the main title is The Secret Diaries of Hitler's Doctor. And it's written by David Irving. It sounds like he has the diaries, but he will reference them and then continue from there with his writing. So it's not just straight. Actually it does like some points. It's straight diary. So I'm interested in seeing how this goes. It looks like it's a mixture of the two. But the back says, the haunted pathological visionary and his ambitious but undramatic, pudgy little doctor were an unlikely pair. Yet Theodor Morell served a grateful Führer for the last 8 years of the Nazi dictator's life. But the doctor was painfully aware that careers could fizzle overnight in the ferocious inner circle, and when necessary, he could practice a little preventative medicine in his own cause, just in case. And this is a quote from the diary entry. My Führer, I said, if a normal doctor had had you for treatment, you would have been off the job for so long that the Reich would have gone to the dogs because of it. I have always had to resort to crash treatments with maximum dosages. I have had to go right to the limits of the permissible, even though I might be condemned by many of my colleagues for so doing. But I am the man with this responsibility, and I am prepared to take it, because if you ever had to take things easy for any length of time, then Germany would end up on the rocks. My dear doctor, he said, I am pleased and happy that I have you. He took my hand in his as he said these words, squeezed it warmly, and fastened a long, grateful look on me. And that's diary entry for November 8th, 1944. It sounds like some of the things from the inside were like, on the inside flap, Theodore Morell, pudgy, balding, and a little sloppy, otherwise unremarkable and clearly not a specialist. His fingernails might not have always been clean, or his needles sterile. Oh my gosh. But he succeeded where others failed. He had pills and injections, and the right words for his Führer's every symptom, condition, and complaint. So he was a licensed medical practitioner with only a dabbler's knowledge in other disciplines, but that was enough. It sounded like he was used to treating the wealthy and famous. Honestly, he sounds like one of those trendy doctors that you used to hear of. I don't know so much anymore. Maybe you still do. But if you read Poirot books or some of those other books, they would talk about the fashionable doctors that, everybody had to see. Like, particularly they would describe, the socialites or some of those people Like, they had to see the fashionable doctor because so-and-so saw them, and only that person can fix me. Sounds like Morel might have been a fashionable doctor, because they're talking about him seeing used to treating the wealthy and famous, and they talk about him treating the Prince Philip of Hesse. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Mussolini, Japan's ambassador Oshima, and even Neville Chamberlain. So he was the guy who saw really the muckety mucks. So I kind of feel like he might have been the fashionable doctor for leaders of various countries, which is kind of amusing when you consider the description of the man. Yeah, it's trying to see if they could do anything else. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I know this is going to be a lot from this guy's point of view, so you would take it with a grain of salt. But to use a quote that people usually do about Poirot, he sounds like he's a bit of a bounder. Just kind of ridiculous, maybe maybe a bit of a poser. I'm interested. I think he knew what to say, and I think he knew how to get on Hitler's good side. Whether or not he was a good doctor, I think that he knew how to court the wealthy and powerful. And sometimes I think when you're dealing with those kind of people, that might be half the battle. So it's very interesting reading that, but that's a little bit down the line. But it's a new book, so I did want to show that. So yeah, I've run on too long, I'm sure. Thank you very much for joining me today for Talia Nerds Out. You have an amazing weekend, because we are headed into the weekend, and I will hopefully see you at least one more time before I have surgery. God bless. Bye-bye.